Welcome to my channel. World Scene News. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. On Thanksgiving Day 2025, President Donald Trump made a stunning announcement that would reverberate across the globe. Standing before a packed press room at the White House with the world's media watching, Trump declared a bold new direction for U.S. foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. He revealed that U.S. military forces would soon launch land-based strikes inside Venezuela, a move that stunned both allies and adversaries. The decision signaled a willingness to escalate the conflict far beyond previous operations, putting American boots on the ground in a region already fraught with tension. This marked a dramatic shift from previous sea-based operations, signaling a new, more aggressive phase in the campaign against President Nicolas Maduro's regime. Until now, U.S. efforts had focused on blockading Venezuela's coastlines and intercepting drug shipments at sea, but the new strategy would bring the conflict directly onto Venezuelan soil. Trump claimed prior naval actions had already crippled the maritime drug trade, and moving the fight to Venezuelan soil would be, in his words, an easier task. He insisted that the U.S. military was prepared for a swift and decisive campaign, promising that American forces would act with precision and strength. The announcement, timed for maximum impact on a national holiday, instantly raised the stakes, transforming a simmering standoff into a potential flashpoint for armed conflict. Newsrooms around the world scrambled to cover the story, and social media erupted with speculation and concern. For years, the U.S. relied on sanctions and diplomacy to pressure Maduro, but this move toward direct military action is a high-risk gamble. The shift away from economic and political measures toward open confrontation marks a turning point in U.S.-Venezuela relations, with unpredictable consequences for the region. Critics warn of a protracted, destabilizing conflict that could draw in neighboring countries and spark a humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, supporters argue that decisive action is overdue to dismantle the criminal networks and corrupt officials propping up Maduro's regime, and that only force will bring real change. The world now watches anxiously as the prospect of direct U.S. military intervention in Venezuela becomes alarmingly real. Families on both sides of the conflict brace for uncertainty, while global leaders call for restraint and dialogue to prevent a wider war. As both nations brace for what comes next, the region stands on the edge of a new and dangerous chapter, one that could reshape the balance of power in Latin America and test the resolve of leaders across the world. The Trump administration justifies this dramatic escalation as a necessary and urgent step in the ongoing war on drugs, framing it as a matter of national security. Officials argue that the threat posed by transnational drug cartels is evolving, and that bold, decisive action is required to protect American interests, both at home and abroad. The administration claims that by expanding military operations from the open sea to the shores of South America, they are taking the fight directly to the source. Officials tout an alleged 85% reduction in sea-based drug smuggling, presenting this figure as clear evidence that military force is effective. They argue that these successes at sea justify expanding similar tactics onto land, suggesting that a show of strength is the only way to disrupt the sophisticated networks that move narcotics across borders. The administration points to high-profile interdictions and dramatic busts as proof that their strategy is working. Since September, U.S. forces have launched over 20 deadly strikes against suspected drug vessels, resulting in dozens of deaths, most of them Venezuelan nationals. These operations are often carried out with little warning and are shrouded in secrecy, raising questions about transparency and accountability. The use of lethal force at sea marks a significant escalation in tactics, blurring the line between law enforcement and military intervention. Yet critics and independent observers point out the lack of public evidence that these boats actually carried drugs, fueling suspicion about the true motives behind the operations. Journalists and analysts have repeatedly pressed officials for proof, but so far, little has been provided beyond official statements and vague references to intelligence. This lack of transparency has led to growing skepticism about whether these actions are truly about stopping drugs, or if there are other less publicized objectives at play. The administration frames Venezuela as the epicenter of a vast state-run cartel known as the Cartel de los Sol, allegedly managed by President Nicolas Maduro's inner circle. U.S. officials claim that high-ranking Venezuelan military and government figures are deeply involved in the drug trade, using their positions to facilitate trafficking and enrich themselves. This narrative paints Venezuela not just as a transit country, but as a central player in the global narcotics market. The stated goal is to cut off drug flows at their source and, in doing so, weaken Maduro's grip on power. By targeting the infrastructure and networks that allegedly support the Venezuelan regime, the administration hopes to disrupt both the drug trade and the political stability of Maduro's government. This strategy is presented as a two-pronged approach, fighting narcotics while also advancing U.S. foreign policy interests in the region. But independent experts note that most Caribbean cocaine is actually bound for Europe, not the United States, casting serious doubt on the claim that these strikes are primarily about protecting American communities. Data from international agencies shows that the majority of maritime drug shipments intercepted in the Caribbean are destined for European ports, where demand for cocaine has surged in recent years. This raises questions about the true focus and effectiveness of U.S. operations in the region. This suggests the real motivation may be geopolitical, using counter-narcotics as a pretext to further isolate and pressure the Maduro regime. By framing the campaign as a fight against drugs, the U.S. can rally international support and justify military involvement, even as the underlying goal may be regime change. The overlap between drug policy and foreign policy has never been more apparent. In this context, the war on drugs becomes inseparable from the broader push for regime change in Venezuela, blurring the lines between counter-narcotics, international diplomacy, and military intervention. The consequences of this approach, both intended and unintended, are still unfolding, with profound implications for the region and for the future of U.S. foreign policy. The threat of land strikes is reinforced by a massive U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, an operation now known as Operation Southern Spear. This is not just a show of force, it's a clear signal to the world that the United States is prepared to act decisively if necessary. The scale and speed of this deployment have drawn global attention, raising the stakes in the region. At the heart of this armada is the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's most advanced nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. It is flanked by a formidable escort of destroyers and special operations ships, each bristling with cutting-edge technology and weaponry. The presence of these vessels underscores the seriousness of the U.S. commitment and its ability to project power far from home shores. Over a dozen warships and 15,000 U.S. troops now form a ring around Venezuela, their positions carefully coordinated for rapid response. Troop formations can be seen on the decks, ready for any contingency. Animated maps reveal the extent of the naval encirclement, highlighting the strategic pressure being applied. This force is far greater than what would be required for routine drug interdiction missions. Its size and composition send a powerful message. The United States is prepared for a major intervention if the situation demands it. The ships move in tight formation, signaling unity and resolve. The deployment serves as both a stern warning to President Maduro and a demonstration of American resolve to allies and adversaries alike. News outlets around the world broadcast images of the fleet, amplifying the psychological impact of the operation. With this force in place, the president now has a wide range of military options at his disposal. These range from limited targeted raids to a full-scale campaign, depending on how events unfold. Military planners review maps and strategies, weighing every possible scenario. The visibility of this buildup is no accident. It is meant to intimidate, to deter, and to make it unmistakably clear that U.S. threats are not mere rhetoric. Public military maneuvers and press conferences reinforce the message, leaving little doubt about American intentions. With forces on high alert, every ship and base in the region is prepared for immediate action. Radar systems sweep the horizon, and personnel remain vigilant, knowing that the situation could escalate at any moment. The message is unmistakable. The United States is ready to act, and the world is watching to see what happens next. Days before Trump's announcement, the U.S. designated the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. This move unlocks sweeping legal powers, freezing assets, banning travel, and criminalizing support for the group. The U.S. alleges the cartel is a state-sponsored criminal enterprise led by Maduro and his allies. While the FTO label doesn't directly authorize military force, it reframes the conflict as counterterrorism, lowering legal and political barriers to intervention. By painting the cartel as terrorists, the administration builds a case for more aggressive action against Venezuela's leadership. President Maduro has fiercely rejected U.S. accusations, calling them a fabricated pretext for invasion. He claims the U.S. is after Venezuela's vast oil reserves, not fighting drugs, and accuses Washington of imperialism. Maduro dismisses the Cartel de los Soles as a myth invented by U.S. intelligence, insisting his government combats trafficking. In response to the military buildup, he's put Venezuelan forces on high alert and staged public drills, vowing to resist any incursion. For Maduro, this is both a defensive measure and a rallying cry, casting Venezuela as a victim of foreign aggression. The government's stance: U.S. actions are not counter-narcotics, they're an illegal act of war. Back in Washington, Trump's plans face fierce scrutiny from Congress and legal experts. Lawmakers question the president's authority to launch strikes without congressional approval, citing the Constitution's war powers. A group of senators has demanded the administration's legal rationale for the deadly operations already conducted. The White House claims broad executive authority, arguing the war powers resolution doesn't apply, alarming many on Capitol Hill. Critics warn this sets a dangerous precedent, eroding checks and balances and risking unauthorized war. As the administration pushes forward, a constitutional clash looms, threatening a political crisis at home. Amid the military buildup, Trump has left the door open to diplomacy, hinting at possible direct talks with Maduro. This unpredictable move could be a genuine attempt to avoid war, or a tactic to show the U.S. has tried every peaceful option. The administration frames it as coercive diplomacy, offering talks while brandishing the threat of force. Yet the gulf between the two sides is vast. Trump wants Maduro out, while Maduro demands sanctions relief and security guarantees. The odds of a breakthrough are slim, but the mere mention of talks offers a glimmer of hope. For now, the threat of conflict overshadows any prospect of negotiation. The world waits to see if diplomacy can prevail over force. The U.S.-Venezuela standoff is a flashpoint in a larger global contest, drawing in Russia and China. Both have invested heavily in Maduro's regime, Russia for strategic influence, China for oil and economic interests. A U.S. intervention would challenge their stakes, risking retaliation or new crises elsewhere. Regional neighbors fear destabilization and a refugee surge, recalling the troubled history of U.S. interventions in Latin America. Even right-leaning governments are wary, caught between opposing Maduro and defending sovereignty. The crisis threatens to fracture alliances and create new diplomatic tensions across the hemisphere. The consequences could ripple far beyond Venezuela's borders. The crisis in Venezuela carries enormous risks for the U.S. and the world. Land strikes would endanger American troops and could spiral into a drawn-out conflict. Venezuela's vast oil reserves mean any fighting could disrupt global energy markets, driving up prices and fueling economic instability. Acting without clear legal authority or international support could undermine global norms and embolden other powers to intervene elsewhere. For Americans, this is a test of national values. Unilateral force or respect for law and alliances. The choices made now will shape U.S. foreign policy for years to come. A military quagmire, a diplomatic breakthrough, or a retreat. Each path carries lasting consequences. As the world watches, the stakes could not be higher.